I have given the order to step off a guardsman's post exactly once in 19 years, and I have also almost court-martialed a man for doing it without my order. Both of those things happened on the same afternoon to the same man at the Veldmere Autumn Procession. I think about it every time the regiment lines the route. The procession runs twice a year. You will have seen it from the outside. The scarlet tunics, the black bearskins, the rifles carried at the precise angle the manual prescribes. The crowd 4 and 5 deep behind the rope line, phones raised. From inside the formation it looks different. What you see is a corridor of shoulders and white gloves, and beyond them, 8,000 people pressing forward into the narrow channel of the marching route. You hear it before you see it. The roar of the crowd rolling ahead of you like a wave, and then the weight of their watching pressing in from both sides. You do not look at them. You look at the shoulders of the man in front of you, and you keep the step. I was walking post command that afternoon. My role during a procession is the invisible seam. I move along the inner edge of the rope line, watch the formation, watch the crowd, watch for anything that needs correcting before it becomes an incident. I had just passed the third lamppost on the Graymere stretch when I saw guardsman Callum Hart break step. Not a stumble. Hart had 11 years on that route and had never broken step for anything. Not a tourist who shoved his arm in for a photograph. Not a handful of gravel flung by a drunk who thought it would be funny. Not a woman who once screamed directly into his ear at the corner. He had held through all of it. So when his right foot hesitated and his head dropped a fraction to the left, I was already moving. He had not looked. That is what I want to be precise about, because it matters when you're deciding whether a man was reckless or reading the room correctly. He had not turned to look. His eyes had stayed forward, trained on the sergeant's shoulder ahead of him. But his left hand, the one closest to the rope line, had felt something. A tug, 2 fingers, small, catching the cuff of his white glove through the gap in the crowd. I saw the hand pull free. I saw it reach back through the rope. I got close enough to see that it was trembling. Hart had felt it too. He kept moving, another pace, too, and then he did something I had never seen him do in 11 years of service. He turned his head. Not a sweep, not a scan. A single, deliberate degree of rotation, just enough to bring the rope line into his peripheral vision, and he read whatever he saw there in the time it takes to blink. He turned his eyes forward again. One more pace, then he stepped out of formation. He did not shove through the line. He did not speak. He simply pivoted toward the rope, lifted the cord, stepped under it in a single clean motion, and stood between the crowd and whatever was behind that reaching hand. The 2 guardsmen behind him closed the gap without a word. Formation is trained into the muscle. They adjusted automatically, and Hart disappeared into the crowd as though he had always meant to be there. I had a decision to make in about 4 seconds. I could call him back. One word over the line, his name, and the protocol is restored. He returns. He takes his sanction later. The procession continues unmarked. Or I could follow him. I followed him. The crowd parted because a man in a full bearskin takes up space, and because people can feel authority without being told to. I came through the gap he had made and found him crouched at the rope's stanchion. Down on one knee, the bearskin tilted back so it did not bear down, his white gloves folded in his lap. In front of him, pressed against the far side of the stanchion, was a small figure wedged behind a pair of adults who had no idea she was there. A girl, perhaps 6 or 7, her coat buttoned wrong, her eyes red-rimmed and dry the way eyes go when the crying has been going on for a long time and the tears have run out. She had one hand pressed flat against the rope stanchion as though it were the only still thing in the world. In the other hand she held a folded scrap of paper. She wasn't looking at the crowd. She was looking at Hart. He had both of his large, white-gloved hands open and flat, palms up, resting on his knees. He had not touched her. He had not reached for her. He was simply present. The enormous, immaculate, ridiculous figure of a ceremonial guardsman down on one knee in the middle of the Graymere stretch. Crowd. And he was waiting for her to decide what to do with him. She held the folded paper out. He took it carefully between 2 fingers. He unfolded it without looking away from her. I looked at it over his shoulder. It was a receipt from a food stall. The back was blank, and someone, a small hand with a blunt pencil, had printed 2 words in large, careful letters. Help me. She'd had it ready. She'd been carrying it. waiting for someone to give it to. I turned to the crowd and found what I was looking for quickly, because he was already moving, a broad man in a dark jacket at the back of the throng, pushing toward the rope line with his eyes on the girl and the expression of someone who has lost something and wants it back. He stopped when he saw me. He took in the uniform, the rank insignia, the fact that I was already watching him with my full attention, and he stopped completely. I held up one hand. He did not move. Two of my crowd liaison officers were 30 meters south. They are good at their jobs. I had them on my radio before the broad man decided whether he was going to try another avenue, and they had him located and spoken to within 90 seconds. He gave a name. The name he gave did not match anyone in the girl's documented family. He was escorted away from the route, and my officers stayed with him while a duty sergeant located the girl's actual people who had lost her in the crowd 30 minutes earlier, had been searching in growing panic and arrived white-faced and wordless at the stanchion to find their daughter sitting quietly on the cobblestones beside a king's guardsman in full dress, who had produced from somewhere inside his tunic a small wrapped sweet and placed it on the cobblestones between them without a word. He had not given it to her. He had put it down neutrally and let her choose. She had taken it. Her mother dropped to her knees and put her arms around her daughter and wept without any sound at all. Hart straightened up, slowly. 19 years of procession, marching does things to a man's knees, and he had been crouching on stone and stood at something approaching attention, though the formation was long past and there was no one to stand at attention for. He was looking at the middle distance the way guardsmen look when they are trying to make themselves small, which is difficult to do in a bearskin. I stood beside him for a moment. The crowd that had pressed close was now giving us room without knowing why. "Hart," I said. "Sir, you broke formation." "Yes, sir. You stepped off your post without an order and without flagging the deviation." "Yes, sir." I watched the mother and daughter for a moment. The father had come through the crowd behind them and was now crouched beside both of them with his arms around the whole knot of them, his face buried in his wife's shoulder. "Did you see the man in the dark jacket before you stepped off?" I asked. Hart was quiet for a second. "I saw the hand, sir, and I saw the paper, the note she held out to me. I didn't see the man until after." "What did you see in the note?" "2 words, sir." "And that was enough?" He didn't answer immediately. In 11 years I had never heard Hart try to argue his way out of anything, and he didn't try now. "I decided it was, sir," he said. "I'll accept whatever comes from that." That is the answer of a man who knows exactly what he did, understands exactly what it cost him, and made the choice anyway. It is not the answer you want to have to court-martial. I took the folded receipt out of my breast pocket. I had kept it as evidence. I looked at those 2 careful letters pressed into a food stall receipt with a blunt pencil, and I thought about a small hand trembling against a rope stanchion and reaching through the one gap in the world that felt safe. I put it back in my pocket. "You broke the formation and the post protocol," I said. "That will be documented. You will present to me Monday at 0700, and we will discuss it formally." I paused. "The documentation will note that the deviation was brief, that the formation adjusted cleanly, and that the deviation resulted in the securing of a vulnerable person and the identification and removal of an unknown adult who lacked any documented relationship to that person." I looked at him. "Is there anything in that account you would dispute?" "No, sir," Hart said. "Good." I turned back toward the route. The tail of the procession had passed. The crowd was thinning. The cobblestones were wet from a rain that had come and gone while none of us were paying attention to the sky. "Get back to the column. Walk pace." He went. I watched him go, the enormous, immovable figure in red and black moving through the thinning crowd back toward the route, back to his place. And then I looked back once at the small family still wrapped around each other against the stanchion. The father had straightened up and was watching Hart walk away. He raised his hand. Not a wave. A different gesture, the kind you see older men make at a military funeral when the procession passes. Slow, deliberate, meaningful. Hart did not see it. He had his eyes forward and his step squared, and he was already back inside the discipline where he lived. That is what the post demands. You hold it even after the storm breaks. You hold it especially then. I saw it for him. That was enough.